everyone, Paul Artale here, and I've got a very simple public speaking tip today. We're talking about stage movement, specifically how to plot your stage movement during a speech, because one of two things happens with a lot of speakers. Either they stand there like a statue and they never move, or they pace back and forth as if as if it was 1952 and they were an expectant father in the delivery room. And either way, that's not good. On one end, standing still just makes you really bored as an audience member, and of course, if you move too much, people do the ping pong tennis thing, and that can also be distracting and annoying, and it takes away from your message. So when you're plotting your stage movement, you need to think of a couple of things. Number one, you need to think of when you're going to move and how you're going to do that. And to do that, really what you have to do is you have to dissect your speech. If you write your speech, this becomes a lot easier because you can go through your script and you can put those plot points in. If you don't write your speech and you do everything off memory, number one, I recommend you at least write something down, have some sort of outline, and number two, then you're gonna have to find a way to come up with note cards or some way of designating the different points of your speech. But once you do that, the best thing you can do is plot it out, get a whiteboard, get a piece of paper, get whatever works for you, and draw up a stage so you can see my artistic rendition of a stage. And let's say you have a story. I'm trying to think of a story I've done. I talk about my competition speech, which was called The Treasure, that I did for Toastmasters. All right, there are different points in that story, but for me, you mark off center stage. All right, and for me, story one was my open. All right, you don't have to get too detailed with this, but I put my open up on the board, and I knew that I was going to start on center stage with my opening lines, with my opening story, questions, whatever. And then for me, my next movement went to here, and I called this the father intro. So in that speech, I talked about how I introduced my father, or how I do introduce my father, and what I did in there, and I sort of set up his character and some of our conflicts during that. And from there, I start to come forward on an angle a little bit up here to what I call point 3, and I talk about moving. My dad wants to drive me from Toronto to Kansas. It's not a fun 16-hour road trip, so I talk about the conflict with that and some of those issues. And then I come back to center, and I talk about, I call it the change. So if you notice, even though for me I just have keywords that mimic different points of a speech, for you that if you're doing a technical presentation, this might be more mimicking a point about productivity point 1, productivity point 2, whatever it is. So there was the change. My feelings about my dad started to change a little bit. I kind of grew up, and then I matured, and then I travel all the way up here for 5 for life. I call this life goes on, right? And then six would be what I called the incident. So my life went on, something happened to my father, really again changed my perspective on life. And I go back to the stage, and then to point 7, the insight. So what I learned about this whole situation with my father. And of course, I come back to finish at center stage for number 8, the call to action. So you can see for me, that's my plot graph of my stage. I know if I have a bigger stage, I can expand those points. If I have a smaller stage, the movements get closer together, but I have a plan of attack when I get on stage and I start telling the stories more or less, and that's really good. That's for a 5 to 7 minute speech. It can work for much longer speeches. Those points could just be longer modules. It depends. There's different formats. There's no right or wrong. I like to do left to right quite often. It's easy for me to remember. In another video, I'll talk about where you tell your stories, but for now, that's how I plot it. It's simple. It gives you purpose, and so whatever stories you tell, whatever speeches you give, you have to have some sort of plotted speech, because I made the mistake of even doing this speech without a plot, and I was just bouncing back and forth, and I really lost that principle. That's my public speaking tip for the day. If you like these videos, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you see in the bubble below, you'll see where you can subscribe to my public speaking newsletter, which I publish from time to time. Give you some public speaking tips, let you know what I'm doing. So until next time, keep speaking. Let me know how I can help.